Hi there, and welcome to this product demonstration of Chiji Processing Cards. So what we're going to take a look at, first of all, is what are Chiji cards? Where did they come from? What do you get if you order a pack? How can I use them, secondly? And that's looking specifically at their original designed for use, which is reviewing experiential learning. Thirdly, we're going to take a look at what other learning you might use them for, and we have a couple of suggestions. And then finally, we're going to take a look at some questions from a live product demonstration that we did recently. So in terms of background, they were originally developed by three people, by Buzz, Chris and Stephen in the US. One's a university professor, two were ropes course directors, and what they were looking for is a processing, as it would be called in the US, or a debriefing tool, as we would say here in the UK, for experiential educators. So they were looking for something that was purpose designed, couldn't find it, so decided to create their own. And that's one of the reasons we really like this tool, that it had a specific design intent in mind rather than just a collection of images. So it was designed by them, and this is their description, to help conduct quality debriefing sessions without manipulating the line of questioning. And I do find that quite interesting because I think a highly skilled facilitator is able to move a group around and through the experiential learning cycle to give people a good sense of what they've learned and help them to understand and apply it. So specifically, what are Chiji cards? It's a playing card deck with 48 images. It also contains 2 blank cards, which can be useful if you want to add on your own image, or alternatively put a couple of blank cards in just in case someone can't find an image that talks to them, but I've yet to see that happen. And there are a couple of very simple instruction cards that come with it. There is a full booklet that's available separately, which goes into a lot more detail on uses for Chiji cards and how they were developed and so on. But I think for most people, the deck is probably sufficient if you're a relatively experienced facilitator. I think it's also important to look at the meaning of Chiji. So although I don't understand Chinese, I understand from the developers that it means significant moment or turning point. So we're talking about maybe in the literal sense an event that could change a person's life, whether that's for the better or worse, I guess depends on the individual's readiness, willingness to learn from the experience. So we're not suggesting that every experiential learning session is going to contain this significant moment or turning point, or that the Chiji cards can make that happen. But certainly using this type of tool and having the key suggests that if the significant moment is uncovered, the cards can be useful to help open that door even wider to new and valuable opportunities. And I think the thing that certainly resonates with us is that when groups use pictures and objects in group discussions, the dialogue seems to be much broader and deeper. So you get deeper thoughts, more creative ideas and stronger connections between the group. So we are great fans of using metaphor and particularly around pictures and images. So let's have a look at what Chiji cards actually are. So I'm going to put up the 48 cards and just give you a few seconds to run through them. So if you have a quick look, we will get other opportunities to go through these images in a second, but I just want to show you each of the sets. So you can see these are illustrations that have been drawn, I'm guessing specifically from some word descriptions to make sure that the group had a sufficient range of cards that could take a debriefing session in any kind of particular direction. So that's a quick view of the 48 cards. As I say, we'll get a chance to look at them again in a second. So let's look more specifically at how would we use these cards in an experiential learning session. So I think the first thing is, why would you use a prop at all after an activity? And for us, this comes back to really believing in the Kolb cycle in terms of learning, particularly when it's more formal learning and when an experience has been planned. Of course, this also happens when you have some kind of unplanned experience, but generally RSVP Design's main focus in terms of our product business is about creating tools that will allow you to have an experience, a planned experience that will uncover particular behaviours or focus on particular skills. But the next three stages are just as important, or arguably more important. And the first is, as a facilitator, to help the group to notice and observe actually what went on, to reflect what happened while you're engrossed in a particular activity. Then taking the group to help understand what happened. So having had the reflection and to notice it, can we conclude why something happened, or what caused something to happen? And then probably the most important bit is so what? So what are the conclusions that we want to test, potentially to go into a new activity, modify future decisions, change behaviours, or indeed how we might apply those in the workplace. So what we're saying is that we need to complete all of those stages to have full learning and to be able to apply the learning that's gained from the experience. So let's take a look at those three stages after the experience. So the first would be to notice and observe. And in this case, a question might be, pick one or two cards that, for any reason at all, describe your feelings, thoughts or emotions from today's activity. And in fact, that's a single question that's provided with the Chiji cards. So what this is about could be immediately after an activity, helping people to notice what their personal reflection was about during the activity, or it could indeed be towards the end of a program. The next one would be about helping them to understand why that happened. So again, a sample question could be something around, is there a card that you might choose to explain why X happened? And X in this case could be, well, the group was working really well for the first 15 minutes, and then in the middle third of the activity we really struggled. So the question might be, well, have a look, is there a card that you would choose to explain why things seem to drop in that middle third of the activity? What's your view of it? And then moving into the final area of testing conclusions or looking at moving things forward, it could be, so let's say the group wasn't particularly successful in the activity. So on reflection and understanding what went on, let's think about a card. Is there a card there that speaks to you about how a different outcome could have been achieved? So if your behaviour had been different, if a different process had been followed, what might have made a more successful outcome for that activity? And potentially we could take that idea into applying it or testing that conclusion in another activity or indeed in the workplace. So those are some of the areas that we might want to use it, but let's think of a more practical situation for you. So what I want you to do as you're watching this is think of a learning situation you were involved in recently. So it would be something that was planned to be an educational experience. So it could have been a golf lesson, it could have been something social, it could have been participating in an organisational training event, it could have been something at home, trying a new recipe for the first time, whatever it may be, or indeed joining this or any other webinar. So once you've got one in mind, I want you to think about it, and then I want to have a couple of questions around this. So the first would be, so thinking back, what were your feelings before you started that learning situation? Okay, can you choose a card that describes that from the group that you've had a look at, and I'm going to show you again. Okay, so do you have one in mind? Thinking back again, what were your feelings at the end of the learning situation? So can you choose a card that describes that? So have the learning situation in mind. We're going to flick through the cards. I'll give you a little bit of time to review them and see if you can pick out a card that speaks to you about how you felt before you started and at the end of that learning experience. So here they are. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to review all 48 cards. So that's a simple way that you might use the cards and get people to share and look at different perspectives and individual learning on the same learning experience. Okay, so we wanted to try it with a live experience with the group that we had, and we decided to choose an RSVP design online activity, as we were all online on a webinar, and we decided to choose a paired experiential activity called Colorblind Plus, and this was around communications. So we did have 2 volunteers, and I'm going to run that and let you see how it panned out. But I'm going to give you a little bit of background just on the activity and the brief first of all. So this is a typical view that the participant, one of the pairs, would receive, and when they click on the link, they'll open and they'll see 3 coloured shapes, as you can see here. So they can't see what their partner has, but they can communicate verbally. And the activity brief is that their partner will have a similar image, so they'll also have 3 shapes. But as a pair, they've got to work out which of the 3 shapes doesn't have an identical shape in the partner set. So 2 of the 3 shapes on screen would be identical and 1 would be different. And through a process of elimination and discussion, they have to identify it. So when they both believe they've got the complete answer, they should offer it to the facilitator. 1 attempt is allowed, and so they should be confident it's correct. And normally we would give them 5 to 10 minutes, but on this example, we just wanted to hear some dialogue for a few minutes, and then wanted to move ahead in using the Chiji cards. So from that brief and having seen what the individuals will see, we're going to move and just hear the little bit of the end of that discussion, and then move on to how we would use the Chiji cards to debrief something like Colorblind Plus.
Yeah,
I could see a face on that somehow as you were describing.
Okay, so maybe that's the second one. Should we just, as we have only 5 minutes left, just look at the third one to see?
So this one is very different.
And it has a hole.
Mine has no holes.
Okay.
It has curved lines and straight lines. And all the curves are concave going in. I get concave and convex sometimes. So all the curved lines are concave going into the object versus going out from the object, except for one edge is a rounded edge that's going out.
Okay.
Okay, can I just cut across you there? That's perfect. I just wanted 5 minutes of an activity so that we could talk about how we might use it. So
Good job,
both, Suzanne and Jeff. Let me kind of share so that Gaspar and Emma can see both, and so you can see them as well. So this exercise is about the difficulties in communicating when you don't share the same visual frame of reference, and we have this all the time, whether it's to do with language, as Suzanne was talking about, or culture, or time zones, or even just technology, if you're on email versus video calls versus so on. So this is a kind of little 5-minute activity that looks at some of the things that you have to do to ensure good communications. And it was all little cycles that you saw about checking, understanding, moving on, coming back and checking. So things that we tend to kind of put aside at one time. And it's quite a sneaky activity because, again, Suzanne and Jeff both know colorblind well. These shapes are more complicated and more difficult. And then we kind of make it worse by orientating them and putting them in the wrong order. So if you're seeing my screen there, you can see Jeff's third shape, which is the one that's got the outline, and Suzanne's first shape are not the same. And it's really interesting when you listen to people do this, because quite often they want to make a match because they want to appear helpful, whereas what you're trying to do in this is not do it. So we could go through a whole verbal review about what works, and this is a 5-minute opening activity. So I just wanted to use that experience and to say, well, let's again move back into Chiji cards and say, well, what would we do with that? So just give me a little second. And I probably had a look at Colorblind Plus as a simple paired activity. So again, let me ask probably Suzanne and Jeff, you know, could you pick a card that describes your strategy or how you were planning to begin this activity just after the brief was provided? Okay. So again, the question is, what was your plan before you started? So once you understood what the task was to be done, what were you thinking in terms of a strategy? And is there a card that jumps out at you from there? So I've given you the brief, Colorblind Plus. Is there a card that speaks to you about how you were planning to approach this? Sorry, I'm just replying to a message from Emma. Okay, and sorry, I jumped to there. And third set, probably getting to notice these pictures now. And the final set. So Suzanne or Jeff, if either of you want to jump out, which card kind of talked about your strategic approach?
Well, I don't know if it was strategy, but I felt at the beginning like a bit the fire. I was excited to do it again and hoping to win and achieve the objectives of finding those two cards. That was how I felt at the beginning. I didn't have a specific strategy at all.
Okay.
I picked the magic. I guess it's an oil lamp, but I'm attributing it to be a magic lamp.
Okay.
Which I think was on your last slide of cards.
The previous one? Oh,
yeah, I think it was the bottom right.
Sorry. Let me go back and just, this one down here. Yeah.
Yeah, bottom, yeah.
Okay.
For me, it's just trying to find some magic in terms of where we can find connections and common language.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. That's perfect. So again, we in terms of tools, one of the reasons we use Colorblind Plus, and I love to use it with groups, is this idea that you often find in organizations where people come into a situation expecting to know what they're going to get out of it, and then suddenly when they're faced with something that doesn't work out, then what strategies do you have to fall back on? So lots of people we know Colorblind, but not as many of them use Colorblind Plus. And when you do the large version, the brief sounds identical, and it's always fascinating to look at the different approaches to what do you do when you don't know what to do, which is a key part, I think, of any kind of personal learning. So that's the reason that I chose the activity, and you can see how you might use the cards in kind of any of those ways going forward. So thank you very much. Interestingly, this is one of the brief questions that we provide in the manual with the physical version of Colorblind Plus. So again, this idea of transfer. So what kind of situation in your own work might you need to use this type of accurate and shared communication and feedback? So if you're working with an intact team, specifically looking at communication challenges, then that might be a relevant question, depending on the seniority in the group. And of course, you can just ask it as we've asked it verbally, but you could also say, let's review the Chiji cards again and see if one stands out. So, and I'm not suggesting you would do this all of the time, but there are certainly some ways to use it. So I hope that gives you some areas to think about in terms of looking at it as a review tool. However, as I said at the start, we're great fans of image decks, and there's lots of other ways that you can use any kind of rich image deck like this. And I'm going to sort of throw up 5. I'm sure you guys would have other ones as well. The first is maybe to go to a deeper review than choosing your own Chiji card. And again, it might not be relevant for you, but I know in some organizations where there's large rollouts of programs across large populations, the reviews can sometimes be a bit formulaic. You know, people are already rehearsing what they were going to say when it comes to my turn to give a review that, you know, just doesn't feel authentic. So one way might be just issuing a random card to a person. So instead of saying, you know, have a look at all 52 and pick one out, let me just give you a random card face down. And what I'm going to do is to force and asking you to force link that image to the review question, making you think a bit deeper about it. So in this case, in what way does this image remind you of something positive that moved the group forward in completing this activity successfully? So again, we're going to a positive mindset, we're going to a strength base, you know, force you to think of it. So the pre-prepared answer you were going to give me, you now need to think a little bit deeper. So it's one way that you might use Chiji cards if you know your group well. Of course, if you're working with a group for the first time, or the group doesn't know each other well, if you're going to ask them to uncover some pretty deep stuff, it's helpful if they can get to know each other. And again, using a random picture issued to each person as they come into the room is a good way, I think, of stealing some time as well. So, you know, class was due to start at 4 o'clock. By the time you get everyone in and settled, you've already lost 10 minutes. Why not use that first 10 minutes as people come in the door, pick up a card, and this time say, I want you to pair up with someone and explain to your partner something you have in common with the card issues. So you're having to reveal something, you've got a stimulus of a card, you're doing it one-to-one. I'm not asking you to stand up in front of the whole group. Once you've done that, exchange the cards, find a new partner and repeat. So, you know, maybe the last couple of people in the room, you know, don't get as long, but it's a good way of stealing some time, and time is always an enemy of us trainers, I think. Similarly, getting to know you. So again, lots of interest in using a team strength based approach. You know, if you want to use that from the start, get everyone to look through the cards face up and pick a card that represents a personal strength they think they possess. And it wouldn't always be relevant for some groups. Some groups might not be confident of doing this, but if you've been working with a group for a while, you could say, okay, now describe that strength to the group. And that's a really easy way of getting it started. You know, you're asking people to put themselves out there. One interesting suggestion, though, I think, is also at the end of it, before you move on, ask the group, well, how are you going to plan to record this? Okay, we're just starting this day, and how are you going to make sure you're using these individual strengths? So it becomes a kind of whole activity. Let's put a little bit of charter up, and as we go through everything that we go through today, let's go back and make sure that we're using these strengths that people have offered to the group. The third way of doing it, this idea of reaching consensus as a group opener. Again, I find, particularly sometimes when you're asked to deal with challenging groups organizationally, you know, conflict and, you know, miscommunication, all of that happens. And I think this opener was designed maybe for younger people just as a bit of fun, but I think it could be, and it does work well with a different type of group. So again, you're just handing out a random picture, and you've got a sense of what some of these pictures are. And ask the group to line up in rank order from the picture of something that is the smallest to the picture of something that is the largest. Now that sounds very literal, but if I kind of flick through some of these cards, I've got one that's a cloud with lightning and a plant growing. I've got another one with sunrise. How do we decide which one is smaller or larger than the other? So there has to be some debate. There has to be a level of consensus reached in order for you to be able to do that. So again, I love to have activities as an opener where I get to view a little bit of the personalities of the team, especially if I don't know them. So watching them do this and see how they would rank it, I think would be useful to me and maybe useful to them about how they actually got to decide what that rank order was. And then finally, you can use this with any deck as a creativity opener or a brainstorm idea. So if you've got a problem to solve, again, using a random picture and brainstorm in a ways which the picture could suggest ways to solve the problem. So let me let's have a go at this. So let's say our problem is, how do we improve RSVP design, sales and marketing? So that's our problem that we're here to quickly brainstorm. Gaspar, could you give me a number between 1 and 10?
7.
7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So anyone brainstorm some ideas about how that image might relate to ways in which RSVP design, or indeed anyone, might be able to improve their sales and marketing. So just literally off the top of your head, what does that image say about you? Feel free to join in, Kim.
Be fast.
Be fast. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say grab your opportunity because it's not there for long.
Okay.
I was going to say, grab your stick and go on knocking on people's door.
Yep, I like it. I like it, Suzanne. Give me one, Jeff.
Oh, I was just thinking of lightning in the bottle for some reason.
Okay, good. So these ideas of a forced connection, what about, let's keep the same subject. Any ideas on this one? Light's a bit bright. So how might we use that image to come up with a new sales and marketing idea?
You need to stand out from the crowd so you can build a tent somewhere unexpected and talk about your products.
Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, so I think you get the idea. I don't know if you've used forced connections in that way, but a good way, even just as a meeting, to get a change of state perhaps sometimes as well, and moving forward. So I'm about 45 minutes in, which was a little bit longer than I thought, but I just wanted to move ahead from that. Anyone, any questions they wanted to ask about the cards or the use of them while we have a little bit of time at the end?
Could you share the slide deck?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. I'll do that, Suzanne.
Thank you.
How those images have been chosen?
Sorry, Gaspar, say that again, please.
Where are these pictures from, and why did you choose these 48 objects?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Obviously, they're illustrations, so someone has drawn them. I don't know the full story because we didn't develop it, but I know that they spent a couple of years, testing various images. So I suspect they had some kind of written instructions in mind. So they said that we need a card that kind of looks towards the horizon and a way forward. So I suspect it's descriptions of that, but I don't know the full answer, Gaspar. I suspect, both as a university professor and as experienced camp counselors, they'd come up with the kind of areas that they wanted to explore a lot. So most of these images, I think people can fairly easily see a link to lots of soft skills development, around teams and creativity and moving forward and lots of those areas.
I was just asking that because I already use a set of images in my training, but sometimes I use a picture of famous people, maybe even historical people like Napoleon or things like that, and sometimes other things. So I was curious about why they choose exactly these 48 things.
Yeah. I think it is an interesting question. Of the decks that we use, we've got some that are photographs, and I think there are some occasions where seeing something which is a real place or a real object can be useful. We've got others that are cartoons, and one of the cartoon ones we use, which is a bit like this, I guess, we use mostly with senior people because they get a bit disarmed by them, and I quite like that. But I think there's a place for relatively simple ones, like these are relatively simple illustrations. We carry a deck by Center for Creative Leadership called Visual Explorer, and they have quite complicated paintings and older historical paintings. There's a lot in each image, and it takes a lot of time to go through it. So I guess it just depends. I think for this, you want something that people can kind of quickly assimilate on. I don't think you want to spend my gut feel is you don't want people to spend too much time because you want to trigger something that's maybe just under the surface. Yeah.
It's clear that it can be very well working as a catalyst of emotions, and this can be nice for every training. I have another question.
Sure.
If I buy the cards, am I authorized to use them in a virtual setting like now, showing the cards on the screen and without being in a face-to-face setting?
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure they would be. I know that the owners of the images and the cards don't have a digital version. And actually, and it was one of the questions that I was asked before Emma had to go. We've had discussions. We have that online platform that I showed you for colorblind. We're planning to launch an image sharing one on it. So I suspect we'll have this soon, because one of the things you can do as well there is let people spend their own time going through them. So the way I was trying to do it today with the camera isn't ideal, but yeah, you wouldn't be infringing copyright to do it because you're using the physical version that you've bought. So I don't think that would be a problem.
Okay, thanks.
Good. And Jeff, you clearly have your own deck there. So have you used Chiji cards for a while?
I've used CG cards for about 5 years.
Okay.
And I just collect card decks. So,
a bit like us.
and each one is kind of unique unto itself based on the imagery. One of my favorite things literally at times is just to throw all the cards on the floor and let you get 5 minutes to find the card that speaks to you.
Yeah.
And then just share the story of what drew you to it. Sorry, Graham?
Do you mix the decks when you do that, or would you do that with a single deck like the Chiji?
It depends on the number of participants.
Yeah.
I find, basically all the card decks are basically accessing metaphors. And so part of when I use the decks is to have some conversation about metaphors and the meaning and how they are used. And the power of metaphors, and then also go into the notion of, as leaders are really telling stories to organizations, to colleagues, to their people they're leading, and so giving people the opportunity to think of new ways to tell stories. So another way I do this is just you pick a card and then you've got 3 minutes to come up with a story about the card. Whether it's something that relates to you or a story, is there something from a role model that connects to this card? However, as an icebreaker, and then just use that as a mingler.
Yeah.
So there's something. What I love about this deck is the cards are subject to interpretation based on who you are and where you're from and your experience in life. So I described one of the cards I picked as a magic lamp, but yet it's an oil lamp. So yes. I added the extra layer of how I saw it and perceived it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think you're right. People see whatever they want to see, once they have it. And what I like is you tend to get another level of honesty when people have it, because if it's a metaphor, I can talk about this card in my hand, which is not really me, but I'm speaking through it, and it works really well. Yeah, good.
There's also something that by having the tactile adds to the story, I think, and the experience for people when you're interacting versus you just giving people icebreaker questions. I think that changes for some reason the feel of it for each individual.
Good.
You're connecting to another sense. So
yes.
One of the things I've learned from virtual is I need to use as many of the senses as I can.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you would think that images would be one of the easiest things to share digitally because you're just putting a photograph up or holding it. But yeah, I do think you miss that power of even going through the sort. There's no easy way of getting 52 cards, even if you've got a big screen like I have just now. And it's not quite the same as kind of moving them apart and suddenly a card gets revealed to you. And I'm a very cynical, logical left brain engineer, so this isn't my comfort zone. But even I can see how it absolutely works as an interaction. Yeah, good. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, I will let you guys go. As always, I would say, there's lots of information on our imagery and how to use it, as well as the individual card decks on the website. But please get in touch if you've got any questions, or if we can help in any way. And really glad to see you join us. And thank you particularly for Suzanne and Jeff for playing along when you weren't expecting to, and for volunteering.
That's great.
It was fun. Thank you,
No
Graham, for the moderation, and Jeff for the jumping in and helping me. And Gaspari, I wish you a very nice evening in Firenze. Ciao.
Oh, thank you. Bye.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
day.